Welcome to the first installment of Ask the Superintendent. I'm Alina Robin.
And I'm Caitlin Hurley. Do you ever wonder what a superintendent of schools is? What do they do? What are they responsible for?
The roles and responsibilities of public school superintendents vary from school to school and from state to state.
In general, though, public school superintendents are responsible for the management of the school district and are expected to provide leadership.
This requires a superintendent to work closely with the Board of Education to define the district's budget, provide educational leadership related to the curriculum, ensure personnel are qualified and receive routine supervision, maintain the quality of district properties, and ensure positive community relations.
So, to sum up the job of a superintendent, they are basically responsible for everything.
Joining us today to help us sort out this very complicated job is our very own superintendent, Dr. Lynch, Superintendent of Walpole Public Schools. Welcome, Superintendent.
Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. It sounds like you have a very demanding job.
Well, I think there's a lot of demands, but there's a lot of fulfillment. I think it's a job that I would actually recommend to one of my own sons to take eventually, but it has its challenges.
Yeah, well, what do you think is the most difficult part of your job?
Well, I think the most difficult part I would suspect is when good people make bad decisions, and I have to deal with that, whether it's students or adults or community members. And what you have to focus on is the overall good, and that there are times when you have to think about consequences for actions, but what I focus on are the 4,200 kids and the 4,199 who don't make a mistake that day. And I think that, that gets difficult. The other difficulty is when 80% of the people in town don't have kids in school, but we're asking them to support education. And sometimes people tend to not want to spend money. And my job is to go out into the community and get resources for kids and students and for adults, and that's a challenge. You point to the override we just had, and it took a community to pass that because not everyone has kids in school. So we had to look at why we needed the override, what we've done to help ourselves, and gratefully we were able to convince enough people to support your education.
Well, what's the best part of your job?
I think the best part is the people I work with, the hiring good principals like Principal Imbush and assistant principals and the faculty, and seeing students' eyes light up when they finally get a concept and they enjoy working with their teachers. I think that's probably the most fulfilling aspect from my perspective.
So, snow days. This has been a very difficult winter. It must be difficult to know when to call a snow day. Tell us, what are the factors that go into calling school off or allowing schools to be open?
Well, you usually start about 3 days ahead of the storm, and you're watching the path, and the meteorologists have all these different models, and half the time they're right and half the time they're wrong, and that's a difficult aspect of it. What I usually do is the night before a storm, about 6 o'clock, we see if it's a pretty sure thing. We try to give parents and students, high school students particularly, enough time, advance warning that the day may be called off, so that, say they have a difficult exam the next day or they have a paper due, they're not up until 11 or 12 o'clock at night if we know that the storm will cause school to be canceled. We have more than half our parents have kids who need daycare, and they have to set up and line up someone for the next day to take care of the kids if they have to get into work. So, the difficulty is that half the people love the decision, half the people hate it. And you're caught kind of in the middle, and you just do you try to make a decision that's in the best interest of students and their safety. And if the adults aren't happy about that, then that's okay. I talked to the Department of Public Works. I may be on the phone with the supervisor of the plow operators at midnight or at 3 in the morning saying, can we get our parking lots open? Will the sidewalks be safe? Can cars travel safely? over the roadways. So many times, for example, this past week, the decision is made at 4 in the morning. You know, what path is the storm taking? You know, they were talking 50 miles either way. Is the difference between an inch of snow or 10 inches of snow, and then we end up with nothing. So, you know, it's never there's never a perfect answer, but you just use the facts that you have, and you do your diligence, and you make the best decision you can. I'm sure you're confronted with decisions you have to make, and you can't predict the future. You do your best, and then there'll always be those that are the Monday morning quarterbacks, and they'll judge you, and that's okay. You just have to get a thick skin and let it roll off your back and take on the next task.
You must be glad to see spring.
I am. I like spring training. I like to be able to go fishing, see my kids once in a while. It's nice.
Well, we've also heard a lot of complaints about the school lunches. Everybody wants to know what happened.
Well, the federal government got involved with trying to create a more healthy lunch. They looked at the obesity nationwide, the level of obesity, and they wanted to access the schools to start fixing the problem. Most Americans go through public schools, and generally when the federal or state government wants to fix a social problem, they use the schools as a conduit. So we were the lucky recipients of that, and the federal government reduced the amount of portions and the amount of calories and the amount of protein and grains and usually the things people like to eat. We have to reduce salt content, and so although Michelle Obama was out in front of this, it actually took Congress to pass certain regulations, and then it passes down to the state level, and Massachusetts, as they usually do, tighten up the regulations or make some adjustments. They actually tighten them up further. So what happened was, instead of creating, we did create healthier meals, but some of the meals the kids weren't used to and they rejected, and there was a lot of waste, and kids stopped buying meals. So nationwide, there were 1 million less meals sold than the year before. Our costs went up, so we couldn't provide as much food within the price. So fortunately, over the past 6 months, the federal government and the state has relaxed those regulations. And I have to credit Maria Hall, our director of food service, who's been down in Washington and spoke on the students' behalf, and has gone to the State House to speak on students' behalf. So they have relaxed those regulations, but you know, if I'm a student athlete or any student, and you expect so much on your plate and you don't get that, well, you're going to bring it from home. So our participation is up the last couple of months, but it is still a problem, and you know, people either have to get used to the fruits and vegetables, or they don't, and they can choose.
So the school district has just completed MCAS testing, but we were hearing about a new test, PARC.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about this new test and what it will mean for the students in Walpole?
Well, we'll be piloting PARC next week at the high school, Bird Middle School, Boyden School, and Elm, a couple of classes at each building. What the major difference between MCAS and PARC is that PARC, say you have a math equation. In the past, you had to get the equation correct. Now, not only do you have to get the equation correct, you have to explain in words, write out how you got to your answer, what are the different options you looked at. So it's higher order thinking skills. I'm not saying it's a bad thing for kids, but I think that the volume and the expectations and the timing was bad by the Department of Education through the federal government. It was kind of like taking a drink of water through a fire hose. It just came at us all at once. And it was difficult for school systems to process that, not only to have the resources, but to have the time to make adjustments to our curricula and help teachers understand the new changes. So it wasn't fair to teachers, it's not fair to students. So I know my Superintendent's Association, I actually attended the Massachusetts Board of Education meeting We are attending regularly now to see what the board is promulgating, what they're voting on to pass down to the local districts. So, you know, in a nutshell, to wrap it up, it's more rigorous. It reflects more of the new Common Core that's coming our way, although Massachusetts Frameworks has incorporated a lot of the new curricula for years. It's tweaking it. It's changing the scope and sequence of when certain things are taught. It's narrowing the focus so that students are more prepared to compete for college and for careers, whether it's the military or whether it's private industry. So I think in the end it'll be a good thing for students, but just the timing of it is not bad. Too much, too soon.
So it seems that in the media, the only time we hear about school superintendents is when something is wrong. We never hear about when students do something great. So why do you think that is?
Well, you know, why do people slow down on the highway to look at a car accident? You know, who knows why people are interested in things that go wrong. It's beyond me sometimes, but if you watch the news at night, you know, the first story will be about a fire somewhere and someone got hurt. Next story will be about a car accident. And then maybe at the end you might hear of a good story of a student doing something nice for his classmates. I'm not sure why. For example, we had over 70 kids being recognized at the last school committee meeting for getting the best possible score on an MCAS, the 280. Yet the next story was that we were in a budget battle and that there may not be enough money to do everything we want to do next year. So I'm not sure why the media has taken that tack, but obviously society has said we will pay and watch advertisements to listen to bad news. You know, why do people look at the police log every week before they even look at the list of honor roll students? I don't know. I can't explain that, but you know, half the time I spend just trying to control the media and keep them away from the schools and focus on the 1,150 kids at the high school who did the right thing today, not the 2 or 3 who didn't. And it's a constant battle.
So instead of us just asking you questions, we went out into the high school and asked students what they would like to ask you.
Okay.
First, we have a question from Scott Arsenal.
Okay.
What his job was before he became superintendent?
Well, before I was a superintendent, I was a son, a student, a father, a coach, a husband. I went back to college and got a master's degree in education and curriculum instruction from Boston College. I became a central office assistant superintendent for business and operations and worked primarily integrating technology into the classroom. When I came through in my younger days, technology was just coming into vogue and becoming a useful tool in the classroom. So one of the main jobs I had was to provide students with that technology and advocating for resources for technology. I also taught college at the college level at Boston College and Bridgewater State University in school finance and school law, which I enjoy in my spare time. So I try to lead a full life. You know, before, outside the superintendency, I enjoy offshore fishing, and with my 3 sons, that's probably my favorite thing to do. So it's, you know, it's as I'm sure you have to deal with studies and athletics and extracurricular activities and work. There are never enough hours in a day, but you know, before I became a superintendent, I used to you know, run marathons. I've run Boston Marathon 4 times in the last 10 years, so I enjoy that. That's about my life.
Sounds like you're very busy.
I try to be. Keeps me out of trouble.
Up next is a question from Helen Hinton.
Why our schools don't have air conditioning?
Well, the school doesn't have air conditioning because when it was renovated about 10, 12 years ago, not enough people in the community felt there was enough need to pay for it. That's the long and short of it. They were willing to renovate the school, but they weren't willing to go that next step because of the cost It's probably $1 million more to air condition a high school. And the monthly cost, it costs $30,000 a month to run this building just with electricity alone. So it's a huge operation, and you know, they look at the long-term costs. So that's the downside. Good news is that last year we were able to convince town meeting to air condition the auditorium. So that should be happening this summer, and at least it'll be comfortable in June in the auditorium. Probably a lot of the older wing classrooms won't be very comfortable. You know, people look at schools and they say that they think they're closed in July and August, and as you know, this school is open year-round. It's open a lot of nights till 10 o'clock at night. So it just comes down to what people in the community want to pay for. And 80% of the kids in the community don't have kids in school.
I didn't realize it was that expensive.
It is expensive, yeah.
So our last question comes from Katie Carter.
If our high school is going to be redone in the near future?
Well, that's a good question. The high school is about 10 years since the last renovation. I think probably the next building project will be middle schools. Middle school, probably a joint brand new middle school. Combine the two middle schools within the next 10 years, but the community also has concerns about building a senior center, police station, a fire station, and expanding the Department of Public Works. So I think they'll probably be first on the master plan, and then we'll look at a middle school. Now, a couple of the options for a middle school is we could build a new middle school, or at least try to convince the community to build a new middle school. You have to go through what's called an override campaign. They have to increase their taxes. And we'll also look at the option of building a new high school and then moving the middle school kids into this building. But we're not sure if that's what the community wants. You may have differing opinions, and that's what democracy is about. We need 50% plus one vote to pass a school, and you have to look at what is the best opportunity to build a school. Is it a new middle school? Both of those buildings are over 50 years old, whereas this one's been renovated in the last 10 to 12 years. We also have the Fisher School and Old Post Road School, which are over 50 years and haven't been renovated. The Old Post Road was renovated a little bit. So it comes down to priorities within the community.
That's crazy.
Yeah, pretty complicated.
All right, well, we would like to thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you'll come back and speak with us again soon.
It's been my pleasure. The reason I'm here is because of students and your education, and I'll never lose sight of that, I promise.
And we would like to thank you for watching. I'm Alina Robin.
And I'm Caitlin Hurley. Join us next time for Ask the Superintendent.